Good morning. We're glad that you're here this morning as we assemble together to worship God. One of the things that we understand is that early in life we all want to make choices. Children begin at a very early age and they want to make choices. It may be something as simple as what color cup to drink out of or what color shirt to put on, but they want to begin making choices, not realizing that this is something that must be done throughout all of life, not realizing that choices are a very important part of life, and that God has endowed us as moral beings with the opportunity, the privilege of making choices. But with those choices, and listen carefully, with those choices come privileges and also consequences. One of the hardest things to learn, one of the hardest things to grasp, are that the consequences can be so great. So great for the choices that we make. As we go back into the Old Testament, there we go, get the right direction. As we go back into the Old Testament, we're reminded of Adam and Eve. And we know that God created the first man and woman and He placed them here upon the earth. And in so doing, He designed us as free moral agents. Now, free moral agency simply means God has given us the freedom to choose right or wrong, the freedom to choose good or evil. They were given the choice to obey God or to disobey God. Now, as free moral agents, we learn a little about the importance of this in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Because, you see, when God placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it was with instructions. Here we find the first instructions, the first commandments given by God to man. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Now God gave man a choice with the very first commandment. That choice was to obey Him. That choice was to eat of all the trees in the garden except one. And God set forth equally as clear the consequences of the eating of that tree. He said, if you eat of it, you'll die. Period. To obey or disobey, there's your choice. Consequences. If you disobey and eat of the fruit, you will die. Very serious, very severe consequences. Now, sometimes people say, why? Why did God make us? Why did He create man so that he would choose evil? We might even rephrase that to say, why would God make us so that we even have the possibility of choosing evil, of making the wrong choice, especially in light of the fact that our choices have consequences? Well, the answer is quite simple. God wanted man to be good. But God also, in His wisdom, realized that chosen good, notice the wording here I'm using, chosen good is the highest good. That is, if we choose to obey God, if we choose to do God, then it's pleasing to Him. He could have programmed us. He could have created us where we had no choice. He could have made us where we would live a righteous life with no choice. But that would have brought God no pleasure. As created beings, God wanted us to be able to obey Him willingly of our own accord. Man's freedom of choice is taught throughout the Bible. In the Old Testament, for example, in Joshua chapter 24 and verse 15, Joshua made a statement that has lived on for many, many centuries. And it is as valid today as it was when he spoke it. He's talking here to the children of Israel. He's talking here to a group of people who have seen slavery, who have seen 40 years in the wilderness, and now they have seen the promised land. And notice what Joshua says, and if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose, look at that word, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river or the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You and I are faced with a choice today to serve the Lord or to reject Him, to obey the Lord or disobey Him. And this is a choice that we have. But understand, while God gives us the choice to reject Him, to disobey Him, to do our own thing, there are consequences for the choice that we make. God made clear that we have the freedom of choice in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And this is a lengthy reading. That's why I put this. And I want you to look carefully and follow along. A few of the words on the screen here are in bold. That's my doing for emphasis. It's not in your text. Notice carefully now as God is speaking here through Moses. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and do all His commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all the nations of the earth. And all of these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field, and blessed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of the ground, and the fruit of the cattle, and the increase of thy kind, and of the flocks, and of the sheep. Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessings upon thee in the storehouse, and in all that thou settest thine hand unto. And He shall bless thee in the land in which the Lord thy God hath given thee. The Lord shall establish thee an holy people unto Himself, as He hath sworn unto thee. If, notice how many times God uses that word. If thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, and walk in His ways, and all people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of thee. Verse 11, and the Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, in the fruit of the body, and in the fruit of the cattle, and in the fruit of the ground, in the land of which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open unto thee His good treasure, the heaven to give the rain unto the land of His season, and to bless all the work of thine hand. And thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And the Lord shall make thee the head, and not the tail. And thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day, to observe and do them. And thou, verse 14, and thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee. I missed a verse, looks like. To the right hand or to the left, to go after other gods to serve thee. Now notice the word but in verse 15. Again in bold print for emphasis.